From the studio of Blackwater Media in the great city of Atlanta, I'm Dr. William Lester. What lies in store for you is a wintry mix of Yuletide nightmares. Welcome to Blackwater Media's A Creepy Christmas Anthology 5.1. In merry old England, one particularly twisted ghost story harkens back to a tragic event that occurred one Christmas Eve in the late 18th century. According to the legend, there was once a fearsome highwayman known only as Gilbert, who would wander up and down one of the town's main roads. One evening, the night before Christmas as I said, a man and his daughter were traveling in a horse-drawn coach when Gilbert apprehended them. The daughter was able to exit the coach, but before her father could disembark, the horses became startled and bolted down the road with the man and his coachman in tow. The two men struggled to get the horses back under control so that they could go back and find the man's daughter, who had been left behind with Gilbert. However, when they arrived back at the scene, she was nowhere to be found. Instead, they saw Gilbert hunched over the ground with a dagger in his side. Now, rumor claims that once the coach took off down the road, Gilbert revealed to the girl that he was the one who took her brother's life some time before. Thrown into a rage by the revelation, she stabbed him and fled the scene. Now, local legends say that Gilbert was buried by the side of the road, and every Christmas Eve he can be seen wandering the same road, waiting for the coach with the man and his daughter to pass by again. A girl named Beth was home alone one Christmas Eve around 25 years ago. She and her mother, who was a nurse taking the night shift, lived in their small but cozy, comfortable apartment. Beth had just finished decorating the Christmas tree when she heard a scratching sound at the door to their apartment. When she looked through the peephole, she saw a man dressed in a dirty Santa Claus suit. "And it's Santa Claus," she said. Now, Beth may have only been 11 years old, but she wasn't an idiot. She refused to open the door and threatened to call the police if the weird, creepy Santa refused to leave. His solution to this little dilemma? An axe. Beth ran to hide in the closet as the diabolical Kris Kringle hacked down the door. When he found her hiding, she managed to stab him in the eye with a coat hanger, and it all went downhill from there. Beth's mom, named Sarah by the way, finally managed to come home around midnight. She found the door chopped and splintered wide open, and the Christmas tree decorated with little mutilated bits of Beth's body.
What's better to receive at Christmas, and even better to give? An appliance that does something for you every day of the year. Like a toaster, an iron,
or a radio. Name it, you'll find it here. We're headquarters for appliances. We can help you bring good cheer.
It was Christmas Eve, and the family was gathered in the living room. The father was reading the newspaper, and the mother was knitting a sweater. The children, Jim and Steffa, were stretched out on the floor with their crayons and coloring books. "Will you tell us a story?" Steffa demanded. "Yeah, a scary one," Jim insisted. "All right," said their father. "I'm going to tell you about the most fearsome, dangerous, and appalling creature in the world, and it's called the Grither." "Oh, now you've done it," said their mother. "You said his name out loud." "Who is he?" asked Jim. "He's the most awful thing in the world," their father said. "He lives in a cave at the North Pole. The coldest, wettest place on earth is where the Grither makes his home. He sleeps in the wreck of a ship that somehow got squeezed into the mouth of the cave. He doesn't mind the cold and he doesn't mind the wet, but the thing he hates most of all is to hear someone say his name. He has very good ears, and they might get bigger every time his name is spoken anywhere on earth. Sometimes his ears get so big, he can use them to fly." "I don't like this story," Steffa whined. "Too late now," her mother said. "We've already mentioned his name. The Grither is probably on his way to our house this very minute." "It will probably take him a while to get here," said their father. "If we finish the story before he gets here, everything will be fine. By the way, do you know why the Grither is called the Grither?" "Why?" the children asked. "Because he has fists as big as basketballs and arms as long as boa constrictors," said their father with a grin. "Whenever he finds the people who've been speaking his name, he opens up his fists, reaches out his arms, and grithers them in. He grabs them by the head and squeezes them until they pop, just like a balloon." "Does he look like a Bigfoot?" Jim asked. "No," said his father. "He's not like Bigfoot, and he's not like the abominable snowman either. Nobody knows what he looks like for sure. The only people who've ever seen the Grither are the people the Grither has eaten. He's as tall as a tree, but he can bend all the way over and touch the ground. His skin looks like a road map because it's transparent and all his blue and red veins show through. The blue is for fear, and the red is for rage." "Hurry up and finish the story before he gets here," Steffa cried. "The Grither was born on a sailing ship," said her father. "It was blown off course by a storm and got lost in the Arctic Sea. They drifted around for weeks and never saw anything but glaciers and icebergs. Some of the passengers drowned, some froze to death, some starved, and the rest committed suicide. The Grither was born out of the fear and rage of all those people." "But why does he kill people?" Jim asked. "Nobody knows," said his father. "He just doesn't like anyone telling his story." "Is that all?" Steffa asked. "Is that the end of the story?" "Not quite," said her father. "There's only one way to protect yourself from the Grither." "And maybe you should stop," the mother interrupted. "I think you've scared them enough." The father chuckled. "You don't believe in the Grither, do you?" he asked. "No." The children lied. "Well, you shouldn't," their father said, "because I made it all up. There's no such thing as the Grither." "But you didn't finish the story," Steffa whined. All of a sudden, the front door blew open, and the room was enveloped in an icy blast of wind. There was a crash and the sound of breaking glass. Then two huge, gnarled arms reached in through the windows and grasped their parents by their heads. As the children watched in terror, the hands squeezed and squeezed, and their parents' heads popped, just like two balloons. Mark Fitzgerald was the captain of a small icebreaker ship in the Canadian Arctic Ocean. He and 6 others of his members on the 65-footer were headed back to Hudson Bay via the Hudson Strait. This trip in particular was shorter and was expected to be a fairly easy one, but Fitzgerald underestimated the thickness of the sea ice during this trip. Fitzgerald was not the type of man who worried easily. He'd sailed over 100 times throughout the Arctic Ocean in his life, through the empty, desolate, cold no-man's land. He had no friends and hardly any family to remember. His life was primarily his job, which to a lot of people would be a place of grief, but to him, it was hardly brain surgery. He navigated most of his life with that type of attitude. Nothing could ever be too tough for the old Fitzgerald that all his comrades knew. However, his cockiness didn't prepare him for what was next for him to endure. To Fitzgerald's surprise and to the dismay of the crew, there was a leak in the boat. So much time had passed since it had been noticed that the ship had a significant amount of water filling the lower vessel of the ship. The amount of water entering the ship was becoming increasingly dangerous. Icebreaker sinking was a very rare issue and a situation Fitzgerald never truly thought he would have to address. Of course, he and his crew, with their long-time experience, had had plenty of drills on situations such as these. However, no number of drills in preparation could make the weight of the stress and bewilderment any less overwhelming. A lot of men such as Fitzgerald himself lived their lives never picturing such things happening to them, but only to other people. Fitzgerald and his crew's dread sunk even deeper when they realized they'd have to evacuate the ship. Stranded in such a harsh, desolate, and hopeless place, Fitzgerald and his crew boarded small lifeboats from the ship, desperate to find the closest ice raft big enough to fit all 7 souls. When they did, it was almost a relief. All 7 men exited the small boat and onto the ice raft, where they were able to pull their small boat onto the raft with them. Fitzgerald made sure to bring some necessities from the shipwreck: a small tent, fire starter, portable stove, flares, packaged food and water, some extra clothes, and the first aid kit. It was midday and all 7 men sat on their raft floating in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, taking in the view of their abandoned sinking ship about a mile away. Their grief gave way to acceptance of their possible deaths and the fact that they were stranded in such a place no human was meant to be. As he sat taking in the infinite expanse of ice and water, Fitzgerald grew tired of sitting and decided to walk around their small icy island, exploring the only thing separating them from the -2 degrees Celsius water. At the other end of the raft, Fitzgerald discovered the remains of a huge skeleton. The only thing that came to his mind was some type of pinniped. The rest of the crew had warmed up some of their food on their portable stove. Fitzgerald made his way to join his men, not mentioning his discovery in fear of worrying the crew. They ate, talked, joked, and laughed, despite their impending doom of being condemned to the icy hell around them. The winds picked up and sent unforgiving cold right through them, cold that penetrated their bones. Fitzgerald began to worry as he felt a tingling numbness in his toes. If only he and his comrades had appropriate kindling for a fire. He contemplated lighting the extra clothes he brought the crew and himself on fire to help avoid frostbite. However, these concerns soon grew minuscule. The men noticed some distance away a white figure bobbing in the water. Fitzgerald got up and walked to the edge of their raft to try to get a better look, but the object disappeared before his eyes. He walked back to sit with his crew, who asked him what the mysterious figure was, but he had no comfortable answer. The figure appeared once again out of the water and onto the ice raft 100 feet away. And now the men could clearly see a gigantic polar bear. The men were terrified, stranded in a place they weren't supposed to be, up against a beast they were never meant to win against. The ice bear the ancient beast whose purpose was to kill, and he was flawless at it, and it stared intently at the 7 vulnerable men. The beast jumped off its ice raft and plunged back in the water, resurfacing on another neighboring ice raft. Now, 60 feet away, the bear stared at its weak and vulnerable prey. All the men could do was stare back in horror. The bear plunged back into the ocean and resurfaced on another neighboring ice raft, much closer this time. And now the killing machine was only 20 feet from the men. Standing tall on its front paws, the bear sniffed the air and again stared coldly at the 7 men. The men stared back at the beast's emotionless, small black eyes. They gathered closer together, forming a sort of huddle, as if that would do them any good. It felt like an eternity as the 7 men stared back at the bear's fixed gaze on them. It was as if they were looking at death itself right in the eyes. Never in their lives had any of those men ever felt so weak, so fragile and helpless. There, not too far away, with only a small amount of water separating it from the men, stood a beast that could do anything it possibly pleased to its 7 little victims. The eternal stillness finally was broken as the bear plunged back into the water. Fitzgerald and his men jumped. They all huddled together in the middle of the raft, not knowing when and where the creature of death could possibly reappear next. Hearts pounded and trembled. It felt like an eternity as Fitzgerald and his comrades constantly looked in every direction, continuing to see nothing but moving water and ice all around them, with no predator in sight. For a second, a glimmer of hope arose in Fitzgerald's mind. Maybe, just maybe, the beast lost interest. This was, of course, deception, an evolutionary flaw in the human mind to deny the inevitable reality. As soon as any of the men finished their last breath, the man-eater returned. Climbing onto their ice raft, running faster than any man could react, the beast grabbed Fitzgerald by the top of his cranium and ran with Fitzgerald in his mouth, plunging back into the ocean. The beast climbed onto a neighboring ice raft some 10 feet away with Fitzgerald and began to eat him alive. The now 6 men could only watch as the bear chomped away on their friend, pulling his intestines and other organs out of his body with ease. The beast was totally content while his meal kicked and screamed in pain at the top of its lungs, contrary to the 6 men. They were deeply troubled, and indeed horrified by the screams, squelching, crunching of bone, and wiggling bloody mass of torn-up flesh that used to be their captain. However, the men could also not look away. It was as if the beast itself forced them into a trance, only to torment them and break their souls. The screaming eventually stopped, and the bear finished chewing on its last piece of meat. All that remained on the island next to them was blood-stained ice and bits and pieces of scattered flesh and bone. The beast lay content in the middle of the mess it made, its white fur now also stained a nice crimson color. Some chunks of matter hung and fell from the animal's face. It was a messy eater. The beast just stared at the 6 men who sat helplessly on the ice raft beside him. It stared intently at its now defeated-looking prey. Each of the 6 men knew that their death was inevitable, and all they were empowered to do was return the gaze. Here's a bizarre old Christmas story that goes back to colonial Maryland. It claims that at midnight on Christmas Eve, the cattle will kneel in the barn and speak with one another. Now, once an old Maryland man decided to test the tale by hiding in the barn at midnight to listen. So he climbed a rope to the window in the hayloft. He lay down on the rough gray boards and covered himself with hay and waited. Around midnight, he saw all the cows in the barn kneel. At first, he could not make out any of the words, but then he heard the cow underneath his hiding place say to its neighbor, "I'm afraid our poor old master will not live out the year." "Oh dear," exclaimed the neighbor. "What a pity." The old man was so frightened by the cow's words that he hurried over to the window, wanting to get away from the barn as fast as he could. But his sweating fingers slipped on the rope, and he fell to the ground, broke his neck, and died. Since then, the folks in Maryland have never eavesdropped on the cattle at midnight on Christmas Eve.
It's holiday time, and Beauregard cries, "Hey, look, there's a snowman ringing our doorbell." And Elsie says, "That's no snowman. It's Elmer with a surprise. Borden's Eggnog, the extra special holiday drink. Borden's, very big on flavor." "Wow, Borden's Eggnog. Now we can have a party." Borden's Eggnog is the delicious holiday treat the whole family loves, right from the carton. It's made with lots of eggs, milk, and real sweet cream. Rich and creamy, better than the best milkshake you ever tasted. Borden's, very big on flavor. This is the only time of year you can get it, so ask Mom for Borden's Eggnog today.
So by Borden's, very big on flavor.
The Haunted Tree. My parents and I lived in a small house that was around 90 years old. The year would have been 1996. We lived there from the time I was 7 years old to the time I was 19. From the very day that we moved in, I felt that I was not alone. One year around Christmas time, I was having a friend spend the night. The heat had just shut off briefly, and she and I were sitting in the living room watching television when the temperature dropped substantially. As I rose to turn up the heat, the Christmas tree began to shake violently. Ornaments were falling off right and left, and she and I were terrified. We ran upstairs and lay down on my bed. My white cat curled up with us, and my door was open slightly. When I gazed out at the dark hallway, I was horrified to see a tall white figure run down the hall. I turned to my friend, and she acknowledged that she had seen the exact same thing. She never spent the night. Never, ever again. My uncle has a house on a very eastern part of New York State. And the house is said to be haunted because the family that used to own it in the 1800s decided not to give it to the stableman as promised and sold it instead. My uncle's friend and her sister stayed over one night during the Christmas holidays. The friend noticed a maid bringing towels down the stairs when she woke up. She saw the maid again bringing what looked like a coffee percolator down the stairs. Well, she was very impressed by my uncle hiring staff. He's a neurologist in New York City, so he had a habit of spending a little bit extra. She went back to bed and woke up later and came downstairs to see my uncle and his friend just chatting. She asked where the maid went and thought that the maid was cooking breakfast. My uncle had no idea what she was talking about and asked what she looked like. The sister explained, and he just started laughing. He walked her into the living room and pointed to an old photograph. And she said that was the woman that she'd seen. And my uncle replied, "Yeah, she's been dead for about 100 years.
Merry American Christmas.
It was Christmas time just before my 18th birthday. Me and a couple of friends decided it would be a laugh to do the Ouija board. It all started off okay. We were pushing the glass around to freak each other out. A few hours later, we stopped playing, but the glass didn't. It kept moving. We were all in shock. I ended up tipping the board just to stop it. From that day on, I've seen this face on the wall. It's not human. It looks pure evil. I can only describe it as a beast. Like it's moved from wall to window to mirror and keeps threatening me. It chants and screams at me. It told me its name, but I refuse to say it or even write it down. As I've read, if you take notice of it, it gets stronger, and I don't want to invite it in. I no longer have any mirrors in the house, but it started visiting my dreams. I'm alone in a room when it appears, and it tells me what it is. It will have me, and it won't rest until it's got me. I'm 25 now, so this has been going on for a while. I'm scared it will go after my children, as my oldest won't sleep in her room, and is too scared to tell me why.
Holiday greetings from Budweiser. From our family to yours, we wish you a very safe and happy holiday season.
You're listening to the Blackwater Media Radio Network, the finest in digital audio entertainment. This is Blackwater Media coming to you from the great city of Atlanta. I'd like to tell you a very strange story, a Christmas story as it were. Now, it happened years ago. I was only 7 years old, but the terror has remained with me now for more than 40 years. It was Christmas Eve of 1975, and I was very excited to see what I was going to get on Christmas Day. So I crept down the stairs at 2 or so in the morning. The grandfather clock in the hallway was slowly ticking. I remember it very well. I found myself shaking as I turned the living room doorknob. Was I that excited? Why did the metal feel so cold? So as not to wake my parents, I slowly pushed the door open. It would squeak if you did it too fast. And I crept into the living room. It was dark and cold. I mean, it was so cold I could make out my breath in the little light that was there. Was the heating broken? The switch to the dimmer lights was next to the door. I turned it on and slowly turned the dial. In the diminishing gloom, I could make out the armchairs and the Christmas tree, beneath which I could already glimpse the presents. And the leering, skinless face that was now just an inch away from me. Its pupilless eyes seemed to stare straight through me as its stench hit my nostrils like rotting meat via burnt ozone. The thing reared back, its lipless face falling back behind the ragged hood it wore. It turned away and lurched and limped towards the tree. I could see more of it now. It was stooped and withered, emaciated and cadaverous, draped with the rotting rags of what I guess must have once been a robe. The thing seemed mesmerized by the tree. Its head swiveled eerily from side to side as it contemplated what was before it. Then it turned and looked directly at me, lifting a bony finger up to its face where its lips may once have been. My mouth was agape, and I was rooted to that spot. I tried like hell to scream, but no noise came out. Finally, I managed to slowly retreat from the living room, turning off the light as I went. I closed the door quietly and crept up the stairs, too petrified to do anything else. I ran to my room and hid under the covers. Only then did I manage to finally, silently sob with fear. Next morning, I put on a brave face and pretended to be excited as I unwrapped my presents with everyone else. Mom must have known there was something wrong, as she asked if I was okay. Of course, I lied and said I was just tired as I couldn't sleep the night before, as you do when you're 7 and it's Christmas Eve. She hesitated for just a moment, but brushed it off as we picked up all the torn wrapping paper left behind. But all I could think of was that thing I saw the night before. I barely played with my new toys. I just kept seeing its face every time I closed my eyes. As the years have drawn on, I've pondered this in some detail. We've forgotten what Christmas really is. It's how we used to survive the darkest, grimmest time of the year. That's what all the tinsel and merrymaking and Santa Claus all stems from, that need to shut out the darkness and the howling blizzard outside. Yet, I think there's something else too. All those ideas about Christmas being magical is true. We dress it up with elves and reindeer with red noses, but it's more than that. There's a reason why we used to tell ghost stories at Christmas till Halloween took over. It is the one point of the year where the boundaries between this world and the others are at their thinnest. No wonder they have a festival and a nativity this time of year. Consciously or not, we're warding off the horror that seeps into our world during the Yuletide. Maybe that's it. Maybe all the rituals appease the things that wait and ward them off for another year. What's a Christmas tree but an old pagan totem decorated in candles? A ward or an appeasement? Anyway, I can attest to the fact that Christmas is indeed a season of mystery, strangeness, and of spirits. Oh, there's one last thing I'll never forget. All those years ago, the following night I found a scrawled note under my pillow. It said just one word. Shh.